Chapter 216 Medicinal Power. Seeing how careful the ugly man was, Han Li felt embarrassed from trying to find an opportunity from him. He had no better option than to revoke his original intention of teaching him a lesson. After all, apart from the ugly man's previous rudeness to him, he had made no other great offenses toward him. With this thought, Han Li's expression relaxed as he insipidly said, "Since there's nothing else, I will take my leave." With that said, Han Li departed, light as a feather. For a very long moment, the ugly man looked at Han Li's departing figure and finally gave a long sigh. He then mumbled to himself, "This is truly against reason." He hid himself inside the earth fire room and casually secluded himself, succeeding in foundation establishment. As for me, how could I, who found a quiet room and a great amount of supplementary medicine pills, not actually succeed? No wonder. Since this person has been accepted as martial ancestor Li's disciple, it seems his aptitude is certainly beyond normal. The ugly man actually blamed Han Li's success on heavenly talent. If Han Li himself heard this, he would perhaps bitterly laugh without end. At this moment, Han Li had already left Yue Lu Hall. The two individuals guarding the transportation formation had already been exchanged with two others. Otherwise, if they saw Han Li suddenly reach foundation establishment from qi condensation, they would have likely been astonished. Han Li drove his flying magic tool through the sky without the slightest of worry as he thought back to his experience of entering foundation establishment. When Han Li had finished refining the foundation establishment pills 5 months before, after some deliberation, he felt that undergoing foundation establishment in the earth fire room wasn't a bad idea. At the very least, he wouldn't need to worry about others suddenly intruding and interrupting his seclusion, forcing him to leave things half-finished. Thus, with his mind made up, Han Li consumed one of his original 3 foundation establishment pills and then began to make use of medicinal power spreading throughout his body. The power of the foundation establishment pill flared very quickly. After several short hours, Han Li felt a small inferno roaring and steadily growing inside his dantian. All the other parts of his body felt colder than ice. Altogether, he felt a completely distinct feeling of ice and fire. However, this feeling only continued for a short amount of time before the inferno in his dantian disappeared without a trace. The rest of his body also returned to its normal temperature, causing Han Li to be a bit stunned. After a moment of bewilderment, Han Li's complexion greatly changed as he placed his hands against his dantian without letting go. Because at that time, a fierce pain similar to 7 or 8 daggers, simultaneously ripping into him occurred. Not prepared for this in the slightest, Han Li became incomparably pale, slack-jawed, and beaded with sweat the size of soybeans while his entire body bent into a complete curl. While Han Li was painfully curled into a ball on the floor, he was raining curses in his heart. Why did the people who gave the pill to him never mention the pain that came after taking the foundation establishment pill? But without even completing his curses, the sharp pain in his dantian suddenly turned into an explosion. This explosion turned into countless threads of warmth, immediately flowing throughout his body's meridians and reaching even the marrow of his bones. But the warmth then turned into a strange, unbearable itch, as if there were countless ants crawling all over his body. This caused him to want to bang his head against the wall and slightly alleviate his suffering. This torment that nearly caused Han Li to go mad continued for the time it took to eat a meal before it gradually diminished. At this moment, Han Li was finally able to support himself against the corner of the wall and stand with much difficulty. Sweating profusely, he was completely covered in a layer of an indescribable gray substance. Furthermore, it was sticky and emitted an unspeakably strange odor. However, Han Li didn't care about this at all. What was on his mind was that his cultivation had progressed to the 12th layer. Furthermore, he was comfortably warm from head to toe without the slightest of discomfort. It was very clear that the foundation establishment pill from before had already improved his bodily structure, cleansing his marrow and replacing his tendons. As for the warmth in his body, it should be residual medicinal power of the foundation establishment pill. However, After he absorbed it, he used it to increase his magic power. This must be the reason why disciples seclude themselves for 3 months after taking the Foundation Establishment pill. Otherwise, this medicinal power would gradually fade away after time had passed. Han Li now started truly following the steps laid out by those in Foundation Establishment and sincerely sat down, absorbing the residual medicinal power. However, Han Li quickly discovered that the bits of residual medicinal power that remained in his body could only slightly deepen his magic power and could not again be used to improve his physique. If it were only one Foundation Establishment pill, after cleansing the marrow and replacing the tendons, none would naturally let this good opportunity to increase one's magic power pass by, so they would seclude themselves for 3 months to thoroughly absorb the medicinal power. They naturally wouldn't easily abandon it. However, Han Li was not the same. He had great amounts of Foundation Establishment pills on hand. These bits of residual medicinal power weren't enough to enter his eyes. What he was concerned with was improving his physique several times, eventually entering Foundation Establishment. After all, cleansing the marrow and replacing the tendons was the crucial point of breaking through Foundation Establishment. After sitting in meditation for over 10 days, Han Li clearly understood this. Naturally, he did not have the patience to wait several months before taking his second Foundation Establishment pill. After some contemplation, he came to the conclusion that taking consecutive Foundation Establishment pills shouldn't cause any large problems. At most, there should be an excess of residual medicinal power, but this was nothing. After pondering several more times, he took a second Foundation Establishment pill without waiting any further. These was a similar pain and a similar tingling itch. Han Li, who was already prepared, still suffered greatly. However, Han Li had already felt this before, and the sensation seemed to feel slightly lesser than before. However, the impurities that were released from his body were not small. It seemed that his aptitude was truly terrible. After taking his second consecutive Foundation Establishment pill, Han Li did not feel anything strange about the residual magic power in his body. Naturally, the warmth in his bones felt slightly stronger. There weren't any problems at all. Furthermore, his magic power had leaped to the 13th layer, the peak of Qi condensation. As such, Han Li started organizing his thoughts. He shouldn't take the Foundation Establishment pills one after another. Each medicine pill had a similar effect of cleansing one's marrow, further releasing more impurities inside Han Li's body. However, when he took the third pill, Han Li clearly felt the Foundation Establishment pill's marrow cleansing effect decreased noticeably, discharging less and less impurities. But at the same time, the true essence and magic power within his body underwent a fantastic change. The original condition of his true essence, after undergoing several Foundation Establishment pill, had gradually consolidated, changing further into liquid. After his 7th Foundation Establishment pill, apart from a small area at the core of his dantian, his true essence had turned completely into liquid. However, after taking the 7th Foundation Establishment pill, the residual magic power in Han Li's body approached saturation. The original feeling of warmth throughout his body had now turned into a scorching heat, causing Han Li to hesitate. He truly did not know if whether or not chaos would stem from the great amount of medicinal power released once he took the 8th Foundation Establishment. But Han Li felt that he was truly close to reaching Foundation Establishment. It was perhaps only 1 or 2 pills away. After slight contemplation, Han Li's thirst for Foundation Establishment won over, and he took his 8th Foundation Establishment pill. However, when this medicine pill entered his belly, the residual medicinal power that he was barely able to control cried out, suddenly exploding. This heated up the meridians throughout Han Li's body, causing his consciousness to become faint. However, when Han Li woke from his scalding body, he discovered a pleasant surprise. While he was unconscious, he actually succeeded in breaking through, already entering Foundation Establishment. Exhilarated, Han Li immediately thought of jumping into the air to release his excitement. But when he straightened his back, his entire body heated up and he once again fell to the floor, causing him to become greatly scared. Although he had entered Foundation establishment, the residual medicinal power of the 8th pill was not eased in the slightest and still flowed throughout his body. It was still very much dangerous. Under his current circumstances, he immediately cultivated and absorbed his medicinal power. Otherwise, it could explode once again at any time. Although Han Li clearly understood the method of resolving this crisis, he was still incessantly grumbling inwardly, without the slightest of happiness. Apart from the Azure Essence Sword art Han Li had on hand, what other Foundation establishment cultivation method did Han Li have? With just a look at his newly accepted master and how negligently he treated him, one could tell how crappy this cultivation technique was. Furthermore, Han Li had already flipped through the book several times and made a few inquiries to others. This sword art was truly common. Nearly all the Foundation establishment disciples of Yellow Maple Valley had refined 2 or 3 layers. However, none continued to cultivate deeper than 3 layers. Han Li didn't clearly ask about the specific reason, but the worthlessness of this sword art could be clearly seen. Under these circumstances, although Han Li did not want to cultivate it, he could only force himself to. With no better option, he took out the Azure Essence Sword arts and spread it out in front of him. Then he sat cross-legged and cultivated in accordance to the book. This Azure Essence Sword art spanned through 9 layers. The first 3 layers could be cultivated by Qi condensation disciples. The middle 3 layers and last 3 layers could only be cultivated by Foundation establishment and core formation cultivators. Furthermore, for every 3 layers cultivated, one could use a divine ability exclusive to that sword art. After cultivation the first 3 layers, without using a magic tool, one could use a single palm to release a sword streak about 3 meters long. Its power wasn't bad, capable of contending against high-grade magic tools. After cultivating the middle 3 layers, one could release a protective sword shield on one's body in an instant. Although its defensive power was about the same as an elementary mid-grade defensive talisman, it could counterattack with a sword streak. When the sword shield received an attack, a sword streak would automatically be released to counterattack. As for the last 3 layers,